Okay, so one core concept you need to understand of the differences between Australia and Cambodia are the two broad concepts of Instructivism and Constructivism. So a lot of what we focus on in Australia is Constructivism, and a lot of our initial teacher education is based around this idea. Another phrase for it might be student-centered learning, or the student as the center of the learning. It's attached to things like, each student being individual, having their own ideas, forming their own understandings and their own schema. On the other side, you have Instructivism, which is more of the kind of old school, though not necessarily bad, element of teacher as the center of the learning. They have the knowledge, they have the expertise, and in most educational discussions, you sort of have a needle, and it's either going more towards Instructivism, the teacher as the learner, say the UK model where it's focused on direct instruction, maybe explicit direct instruction, which is a sort of brand name attached to that theory. Or in Australia, we're sort of more towards the constructivist idea. So you're talking about personalized learning, differentiation, response to intervention, kind of these big concepts of adapting to your students specifically. Whereas Instructivism, the thing that needs most improving and changing is the form of delivery, the questioning strategies, and the active engagement that the teacher can actually draw out from their students. So the key factor in this is obviously Instructivism works best when you have lots of students. You've got a large class size, maybe 60, maybe 70, 50, 80, a lot of students. You can't get to know all your students and form as strong relationships as you can in a smaller, more familiar class to us Australians. And so therefore you have to take more of a teacher-centered approach. Constructivism, not surprisingly, works a lot better in a smaller class. In a tutorial, let's say, maybe 10 or 12 students, it would work incredibly well. 20 to 25, 30, you're probably starting to stretch it a little bit, and some students might not be seen every lesson. If you do a simple piece of maths with me, you get the number of minutes that you teach a lesson for, you divide that by the number of students, you see how much time is left behind, or how much is allocated to each student, and that's of course excluding any direct instruction, any lecturing, any information you need to directly impart to all of those students. If you look at that number, you can see where Constructivism may work, and if you look at the same number for a much bigger class size, you soonly realise how that might break down in a much larger class size. So comparing Australia's approach and methodology to Cambodia, these are not one is good and one is bad, despite me calling one old school. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it would be quite possible for Cambodian teachers to come to Australia and teach us in the ways of direct instruction, Instructivism, and the sort of teacher-led activities of which they are most adept and skilled at doing. By the contrast, we come and we have mostly a skill set based around constructivist ideas, and therefore we have skills to share. There's a cultural sort of immersion and contrast and discussion that needs to take place. So between these two skill sets, there's not one better or one worse, but there are different strengths. So we, as a collective, can actually form up and share our ideas, share our expertise, and share our strengths to make something new. Further, there's an aspect to it where we as Australians are trying to prepare Cambodians for a future that may not be present now. We're trying to prepare them for a setting where they will have less students in their class and be more able to reach each of their students every single day.